Welcome to the SecureWorld Sessions. We're a cybersecurity podcast that is all about access. Access to people and ideas that can impact your personal cybersecurity career and help you secure your organization. Hi, my name is Bruce Sussman, and I'm Director of Content at SecureWorld and your podcast host. And in today's session, we're talking to a key player in one of the grandest data breaches of all time. The one that sent people in the US, UK, and Canada into a sort of cyber-induced panic. Hackers broke into the Equifax network and stole the personal information on nearly half of all Americans. And Graeme Payne had a front row seat to the carnage as the SVP and Chief Information Officer of Global Corporate Programs.
I was engaged right from day one, so one of the systems that I managed, or my team managed, was the system that was hacked.
That's right. He said his team managed the system that was hacked, the system that had an Apache Struts vulnerability that should have and could have been patched, but was not. And it cost Graeme Payne his job. Today, we are going to hear his side of the story. But first this week, we learned more about the Equifax mega breach than ever before, and this was thanks to newly unsealed court documents. A federal grand jury indicted 4 Chinese nation-backed hackers and detailed the steps they used in the attack. So I thought it'd be fun to pretend this is a sports highlights show right now. Let's cover the Equifax mega breach revelations in just 60 seconds. The indictment says the hackers got on their keyboards in Shanghai, China. They discovered the unpatched vulnerability on the Equifax dispute resolution portal and used a known hacker tactic, a web shell attack, to gain access and install a backdoor for continued access. Then they did detective work. During the reconnaissance, court documents say hackers discovered some type of network credentials, and they used those to get deeper into the system. Because if you have credentials, you look legit.
Access granted.
And then there's this, and I'm quoting from the indictment. Additionally, the conspirators attempted to disguise their unauthorized access by using existing encrypted communication channels within Equifax's network to send questions and commands, which allowed them to blend in with normal network activity. End quote. And they ran more than 9,000 queries on the network. They were mining Equifax. On the hunt for the most valuable information and trade secrets they could steal. And then they got the data ready for a flight around the globe. Court documents say the hackers compressed the data, stored it in temporary files, and then took it out in chunks through 34 servers located in at least 20 countries.
Mission accomplished.
Last thing, one of the crimes the hackers are charged with is economic espionage. And the US Department of Justice says the hackers are members of the Chinese military. Well, now it sounds like we know what happened. But keep in mind, at the time, Graeme Payne did not. In fact, he was at dinner with his wife when he got the call. Our company has been hacked. Let's go to my interview now with Graeme Payne. I spoke with him after his session at SecureWorld Atlanta.
I was engaged right from day one, so one of the systems that I managed, or my team managed, was the system that was hacked. So I was part of a pretty small group of people that lived through the initial analysis of the breach and worked out what the impacts were, and then prepared the company for the public announcement, which happened on September the 7th. And then following that, was working, after the announcement, was then working with in all the post-breach announcement with the call, making sure we had the call centers working and all the other response that we were working on. Right. Well, it was as I said, it was a very small group that was trying to manage through this up until the public announcement, and it was a pretty stressful period because we had to, for a start, we had to understand what happened and do the forensics and then there was a lot of work around preparing for the breach, getting the consumer website stood up, and then also doing the various hardening that needed to happen because when you announce that you've been breached, you're a soft target and so you're opening yourself up for potential further attacks. So you need to make sure that your defenses are robust. So you double down on things like monitoring and additional controls and hardening of your environment and that sort of thing. So on the consumer side, we needed to stand up a separate environment for consumers to come in. I mean, Equifax is primarily a business-to-business environment, so the systems weren't designed to handle hundreds of millions of consumers coming in a very short period. So the solution we came up with was to design a custom portal, which we housed on the public cloud, to allow people to come in and validate whether they were impacted, and then to start the registration process of signing up for credit monitoring and identity protection services.
And that was secret, right? I mean,
that was a separate team that knew they were working on a major breach, but they didn't know that the major breach was actually Equifax until the last moment when we flicked the switch, basically.
Can you imagine? I mean, you're on this small and this secretive team telling others at the organization that they need to stand up a call center for a major data breach. And then as you get ready to flip the switch, you let everyone know, actually, we were the ones breached. I mean, that's fascinating. Let's continue as I ask Graeme Payne if what I read was true, maybe what you read was true, that he was fired for failing to forward an email to the right person, the person who could have patched that Adobe Struts vulnerability.
I was July the 29th. I actually got several calls from the chief security officer, and because the system that got breached was actually within my management responsibility, and so she called and advised me, and that's why from that point on we were engaged in working the issue, the incident. The chief executive, or the former chief executive, testified in Congress in early October about the root cause of the breach, and he said there were two issues. There was a human error and a technological error. The technological error was the security scanner, the vulnerability scanner, did not detect the existence of unpatched system of unpatched version of Apache Struts. The human error was obviously the patch wasn't installed, and the reason they indicated that was the case is because the information didn't get to the people responsible, and they said that it was because I had failed to forward an email to the appropriate people to ensure that they actually patched the system.
And what's your take on that?
I think it's an oversimplification of the of the process. I think that speaks to some of the challenges around patch management and making sure that you've got robust processes to get information to all the key people that need it.
So clearly something broke down in the patch management process. And that actually reminds me of a podcast interview that I did last year at SecureWorld Boston with cybersecurity thought leader Bruce Schneier. And he told me that patching is a failed security paradigm. I'm going to put a link to that episode in the show notes. Now, to another question. Why is Graeme Payne sharing his story? And what did he learn during the mega breach that can help the rest of us in cybersecurity? That part of our interview is coming up. We started this episode talking about Chinese nation-state hackers, and now Trend Micro's research team has an update on someone else, the Outlaw hacking group. Researchers put it like this. We've observed with cybercriminal groups that in their aim to maximize profits from every campaign, silence does not necessarily mean inactivity. It appears hacking group Outlaw which has been silent for the past few months, was simply developing their toolkit for illicit income sources. So here are the lessons learned from the new research that are part of today's Trend Micro Top 3. Number 1, criminal groups are now targeting Linux and Unix systems, including IoT devices, and they're utilizing known vulnerabilities in their attacks. Number 2, don't be lulled by cybercriminal groups that seem to go silent. They are likely working on new TTPs and or identifying new victims to attack. And number 3, researchers are seeing this one again. More often than not, malicious actors will use outdated vulnerabilities to exploit versus 0 days. So be sure to virtually patch or fully patch your systems. And that's some timely insight, isn't it? I'm putting a link to the Trend Micro report in the show notes. It's a detailed read on Outlaw Group's TTPs and also detection techniques. Thanks again to Trend Micro for being our premier podcast partner. Now, back to my final question for Graeme Payne, who got fired by Equifax after the company's mega breach. What can he share with others in cybersecurity that has value?
Well, I think there's lots of lessons learned, but I think, so just a couple that come to mind off the top of my head. So one is, it's often the small things that will bite you, right? So making sure that you've got good hygiene around your environment. So, in this case, it was a patch that wasn't applied. I mean, this is a hygiene thing, right? And so taking care of those small things are often the most important things, right? So making sure so that's lesson number 1. I think lesson number 2 is on the response itself, is making sure that you have rehearsed and understand, what's the worst thing that could happen to your company in terms of breach or incident, security incident, and then be totally prepared for that as best you can, and exercise those processes, including all the way up to the board of directors, and including the board of directors. And then I guess the third thing, having in place all the things you need, like your connections with law enforcement, the connections with forensics capabilities, law firms, your insurance brokers, and so on. Make sure you've got, the public relations side. Make sure you've got all of that, those arrangements in place, so that not if, but when something happens, you can pull those triggers and get those people engaged quickly. The one thing about the Equifax breach is it's a very public event, right? It's been subject to several congressional hearings, both here in the US and there's been investigations also in the UK and Canada. There's been several reports written on this, including a 96-page report by the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, and I think it's been highly studied and highly publicized. So it's very people know a lot about it. And what I'm doing is really talking about it from the lessons learned, having lived through it, so that other people can also learn and help prevent and detect and respond to breaches that will happen to them. Right? We know the incident of breaches continues to rise. Everyone needs to be prepared for it, and so I want to use the knowledge that I gained through having lived through one of the biggest in history, to share and help other people in building a more robust cybersecurity program.
Thank you, Graeme. We really appreciate your willingness to share. And I will put a link to Graeme's LinkedIn page in the show notes in case you have other questions for him. And also a link to the story that I mentioned off the top of the podcast here, which details the 10 steps the Chinese hackers allegedly took to hack Equifax. And by the way, I did ask Graeme about this. He told me a couple of days ago that early on, his team recognized that attacks were originating in China, but he points out what we know, that attribution takes a long time to officially establish, if it can be established at all. And according to the grand jury indictment, it now has been established. So that was an incredible story to share. And now we have a special announcement about something that SecureWorld Expo has never done before. It's coming up March 17th, and I'm welcoming Ali Benson from SecureWorld's event team into the studio. Hi, Ali.
Hello.
It looks like you seem pretty happy, even though I know behind the scenes here you are busy getting ready for what we call event season at SecureWorld.
Yeah, that's true. We've been quite busy
yes,
lately.
You've got 17 regional cybersecurity conferences that are about to kick off.
Yes.
So here we go. And tell us about this special announcement, because I saw something on the SecureWorld Philadelphia agenda that I have never seen before. What is it?
Yeah, so this year we are partnering with Trend Micro to bring a brand new and very special opportunity to the conference. We're calling it the Threat Defense Challenge. And what I find really exciting about this addition to the agenda is that it's really different than the traditional learning environments. So rather than a typical breakout session, which can be very theoretical and doesn't always offer a lot of opportunities to interact with others and connect with your peers, the Threat Defense Challenge will offer attendees a unique opportunity to meet colleagues, work on teams, and run cyber attacks in a controlled environment. So if you're the type of person who learns by doing, which I am, this is really a special opportunity to have on your radar.
Wow, that is so cool. And so
Yeah.
that's basically like the good guys versus the bad guys, and you're all in the same room.
Yeah, and you're
going at
both. You are both people.
Wow, that
Yeah.
sounds fantastic. Well, I honestly, I don't think I'm going to be there yet. I come in the next day. I wish I could be there on the 17th.
Yeah.
Because I'd like to be a part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
So,
exciting.
okay, so that's March 17th at SecureWorld Philadelphia, and then the 18th and the 19th are the actual conference days. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so we're really excited about a great conference there, and I'll put a link in the show notes to all of our 17 regional conferences. And Ali, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Well, let me know if anything we've talked about today triggered any other thoughts for you, around Graeme Payne's interview or the Equifax breach, or, maybe the defense session that we've got going in Philadelphia, whatever it is. Our address is media@secureworldexpo.com. That's media@secureworldexpo.com. And just a reminder, I mention this a lot, but I love it. SecureWorld's mission statement is connecting, informing, and developing leaders in cybersecurity. And because you're listening, you are a part of that now. So thank you. And also, a shout out to Pete from our tech team, who's editing another great podcast episode. And now, let's talk about next Tuesday. We are going to take a look at developing cybersecurity advocates within your organization. You know this is crucial, right? You can't do it yourself. We hear these mantras like security is everyone's responsibility. Well, how do we actually get that to happen? That kind of buy-in and support. We will hear from some experts on that in a series of interviews. That is next week. On behalf of the SecureWorld team, I'm Bruce Sussman, your host of the SecureWorld Sessions, and let's catch up again on the next episode.
DJ at the aim, go.